Good morning. I'm going to kick off by reading a piece of scripture for this morning. It's Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 to 25. Hebrews 10, 23 to 25. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. I want to pick up on what has been a real challenge for us over these past 7 months. In that first part of verse 25, let us not neglect meeting together as some people do. Paul has got real concerns about the Jewish believers drifting away from their newfound faith in Jesus, particularly when life is tough and testing comes. And so he's reminding them of how important it is to keep meeting together. Why does Paul believe it's so important that believers don't neglect meeting together? Well, as you go through this letter to the Hebrews, you find Paul using this communal language, one another language that is directed at people going through stuff together. So in chapter 3, verse 13, Paul says, warn one another, help each other see the things around us that might get us to drift away or even be stumbling blocks. Warn one another as we share our lives with one another. Then in chapter 10, 24 that we've just read, Paul says, motivate one another and encourage one another. When we're on our own, it's so easy to become discouraged and begin to feel weighed down by difficulties and worries. We need one another to spur each other on, particularly when times are tough. In chapter 12, 15, Paul says, look out for each other. In other words, have each other's backs and support one another. And in chapter 13, verse 1, keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters. Through all these one another statements, Paul's overriding message is that we need one another, particularly in difficult times, but actually at any time, we need one another. So Paul says, don't neglect meeting together. If this is something that scripture teaches us is really, really important, what might that look like in 2020, the year of a global pandemic? It's 7 months since lockdown and our last gathering where everyone could come together. And with winter ahead, it's looking like next March, we're going to be marking the anniversary of our last big gathering together. A whole year without being together as a whole gathered Sunday 10:30 congregation, simply because the rules say we can have a maximum of 60 people in the church. We're working through how we can have gatherings that fit the rules with places booked in advance, and that's worked well for the 8 o'clock with a maximum of 20 people so far, and we're going to be trying it for the Wednesday congregation. We've experimented with 1 or 2 one-offs, the outdoor gathering we had, the evening worship last weekend, and next weekend we're having a families gathering. But like all larger churches, finding ways of gathering together is fraught. However, when Paul was writing these words to us in his letter, was he thinking of the size of gathering we'd have on a Sunday morning? It appears not. Sunday mornings are great for gathering for worship, but it's not the size of gathering that encourages sharing our lives together in the way that Paul speaks about. Nor is it the picture we have throughout the New Testament for regular gatherings. Our Sunday morning sort of gathering equates much more to the kind of temple worship, the bigger gatherings that happen from time to time, where everyone would come together to worship God. So what's the picture we do get in the New Testament of a Christian community like Paul was talking about, fulfilling all the one another's that are so often spoken about? Well, the picture is family. In the New Testament, the Greek word oikos is used for the extended family household that society centered around in New Testament times. The oikos originally existed for provision and protection. Provision through different people in the family having different knowledge and skills and time to give. And for example, at harvest time, the size of the oikos meant most of them could get involved in bringing in the crops to provide for the whole extended family. And by having a family that included some stronger people, they were less likely to find robbers attacking them. Living in oikos, sharing life together, provided for and protected the family. Of course, life is very different now. You know, we have home insurance and probably other insurances, and we expect police and government to protect us anyway. And that can sometimes lead us to believe that we can survive on our own. But God created us for relationships. We've been born into a human family of some sort. And then as Christians, we're born into the family of God, making us brothers and sisters. Romans 10:12 says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love." And that word brother in the New Testament is translated from the same womb. I spoke with a lady recently who'd volunteered to help out after a hurricane in Kefalonia. And she was saying how she'd so quickly built relationships as part of a team, to the extent that she'd now decided to stay in Kefalonia for the time being, even though she arrived with a bag packed for a 5-day holiday. Having a shared purpose together really deepens relationships. But we're not just friends with the same cause. We're actually blood related in the spiritual realm. Family. And even with its ups and downs, at the heart of family is covenant love. That's God's intention. Relationships based on commitment rather than feelings, for better, for worse. So God's intention is for each of us to be grafted into a family unit that becomes our spiritual home. And God himself is Trinity, so even God isn't alone. And he's made us in his image to live out the Christian life together, representing something of who he is by living life together. So this isn't just a Sunday thing, but it is about doing life together. Jesus described the extended family of Simon and Andrew as his own family, not his birth family, but a family that's based on a covenant relationship with God and a kingdom mission for the world. This new kind of family that Jesus modeled not only defended and provided for its own members, but it also came to seek and save the lost. Jesus kept, if you like, the door of the courtyard open, inviting anyone and everyone to come and experience and hear about this new kind of kingdom family where life is lived together. And of course, for Jesus, eating together was a big thing. He regularly ate with people, and over meals he shared with them about his Father's endless love for them. He seemed pretty keen on parties, a bit difficult at the moment, although finding ways of having some fun together seems even more important at this time. And if we go to Acts 2:42, we get a picture of the early church meeting together, and their fellowship was so vibrant. Their lifestyle was so attractive, and their warmth was so great that it was kind of infectious. It was like people smelled the aroma of authentic Christian community, and it drew them to Jesus. And this isn't about being perfect, in fact, far from it, but it's about having Jesus as the living centre of our community. And it's when our friends and acquaintances hang around us, they can watch Jesus at work as we invite them and welcome them to come and see. So what does it look like for us in these next 6 months to not give up meeting together? To be part of a community that looks something like the picture we're given in the New Testament. Maybe you're part of a mission community or another group where you're experiencing being family in this way. And if you are, and if it's possible, and if it's welcomed, can you get together in person, in sixes, or maybe even as prayer triplets? You know, Zoom has been really great, hasn't it? It's got us through a really difficult time. And it's going to continue to be really useful for times when we have no option of getting together in person. But if it's possible, how can we get some in-person small gatherings where you can encourage one another and pray for one another and for the world around us too? And maybe it's a kind of mixed economy needed. Sometimes Zoom will be the best option, but how can we sprinkle some other in-person meetings in too? And we're thinking about how this is possible in the larger gatherings, but I encourage you to think about it in the smaller gatherings too. And if you're not connected in with some other people who you can meet with, please just get in touch with myself or Chris. We'd really love to connect people together. I know many of us are feeling a bit weary. The long haul of the virus is taking its toll. And sometimes maybe it can feel easier to be an amputated bit of the body rather than joining with others. But Scripture shows us God's very best way of living, of doing life together, of staying firm in our faith and keeping hope alive, getting through the tough times. Let me finish with God's promise in that bit of Scripture that we had. Let us encourage one another to hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm. For God can be trusted to keep his promise. Have a good day.